Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are Jason Burt, the Telegraph's chief football correspondent, and Henry Winter, the football writer and broadcaster. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run everyone through the back pages, starting with the Eye, which says that David Coote will take no part in UEFA Nations League fixtures amid the investigation into the Premier League referee, while its main image is of Taylor Harwood-Bellis, who's enjoying his maiden call-up to the England squad. First pictures of Ruben Amorim on the training pitch feature in The Sun with the headline, "Pleased to meet Ru," while their main story includes an interview with PFA chief Mehdi Malongo, as data reveals that 232 Premier League games have already been missed by players at English clubs in Europe already this season. The Mail picks up on that theme. "Blame Tuchel" is their headline, claiming Premier League clubs are privately blaming Thomas Tuchel's late arrival as England's permanent boss for a flurry of squad withdrawals this week. Whilst the Guardian's back page is centred by Arsenal's Frida Maanum after they routed Juventus 4-0 in the Women's Champions League. While inside the Telegraph, they ask, can Match of the Day survive after Lineker exit, after the BBC confirm that he will step down after 25 years in the role. Right, let's start with a story that continues to develop. It surrounds the Premier League referee David Coote and a video that appears to show him making derogatory comments about Liverpool and their former manager Jurgen Klopp. Several newspapers have tonight named another individual seen in the video. We on Back Pages tonight have chosen not to, on legal advice. We are going to start, gentlemen, with The Guardian, which acknowledges the fact that this has moved on, Jason, hasn't it? The FA are now investigating, as well as PGMOL, as Web breaks silence on video. Tell us about the FA investigation with this one.
Yeah, some people might wonder why the FA are involved, obviously because David Coote's an employee of the Premier League and the PGMOL, but the FA oversees sort of disciplinary matters and behaviour right across football, and any kind of participant in football, from a player to a manager to a referee to an official, comes under the auspice of the FA. And so clearly these remarks are potentially very damaging, not just in terms of what was said, but obviously xenophobic as well. Obviously mentioning Jurgen Klopp's nationality, that's an aggravating factor, and the FA is within its rights to investigate and will fully investigate the language used by David Coote and whether or not he needs to be charged for disciplinary reasons, and that will run concurrently with the Premier League's own investigation, the PGMOL's own investigation into the videos that were circulating on social media yesterday. So it's a much more serious case, or it's becoming an increasingly serious case for David Coote. I think other people are reporting tonight, obviously, that UEFA are also going to take him out of doing European games. So his career, certainly at every level, is in the balance right now.
Yeah, I mean, Henry, the Times pick up, we're just seeing the Eye here, but the Times pick up on this xenophobic element as well. David Coote may face FA charge for use of German in Jurgen Klopp abuse. This does aggravate things, this use of the word German.
It does. I mean, we haven't heard from David Coote yet, but on the face of it, just watching the video, you can understand why he's been suspended and why the FA have today got involved. And if it's a fairly straightforward, as it seems on the surface, disrepute charge, then as Jason is alluding to, the aggravating factor of mentioning Klopp's nationality is, could lead to further punishment. And obviously the fact that he mentioned someone's nationality, as well as his naivety of allowing a video like this to actually be made of what are his private thoughts. I mean, referees do obviously have private thoughts of managers and players, probably journalists as well, but they're ill-advised to actually to go in front of a camera and actually allow that to come out. He's guilty of naivety at the very least. But I mean, you can't see him. If you're sitting in UEFA's offices, you can't see how he could do a Nations League game involving Germany. And if you're the FA and PGMOL, can he ever do a Liverpool game again?
Yeah, good points. And the eye mentions that UEFA snub Coote pending the investigation. Obviously, we haven't heard from David Coote. The investigation is still ongoing, Jason. But just wonder what this might mean for the football pyramid and referees everywhere, because referees at grassroots level have a tough enough time as it is. It's they get maligned from the sidelines and the abuse they receive. This is not going to help anyone.
No, it's a very good point to make. And one thing that saddens me very much about this story is how was David Coote in the frame of mind that he felt that he needed to use this kind of language when referring to a manager? And, let's be honest, some of these referees are put under a huge amount of pressure. Clearly, he's if this is correct, he's overstepped the mark. He's gone far too far, and frankly, I would be surprised if he referees again in this country. I think it'd be very, very difficult for him to work in the Premier League for sure, and not just with Liverpool games, but any game really. But actually, the fact that he felt quite so upset and angry and used this sort of language about his work really is quite saddening. And as you say, we're in a real sort of febrile atmosphere around refereeing. You see the abuse that they get at every sort of level. The grassroots refereeing is in crisis continually in terms of recruiting young referees, encouraging them. Unfortunately, I've seen youth team games where referees have been abused from the sidelines by parents, by managers, and it's just extraordinary, really. And the sort of whole atmosphere around them, the lack of respect. We've had this respect campaign that's gone on for so many years, but it's never really made any difference whatsoever. But the lack of respect towards officials, I get the fact that a lot of people feel that we're in a very sort of, fallow period in terms of the quality of referees in this country. But why is that? Is that simply because people are just turned off by the idea of becoming a referee, that it's just not worth it, the abuse they get, and so on and so forth? So we're in a real crisis situation in terms of the way we deal with referees, the way that people feel about being referees. And I think it's a really difficult situation for everyone to try and resolve. But the lack of respect in particular permeates everywhere. Now we're seeing referees themselves showing a lack of respect towards other people in football.
Yeah, and Henry, this is going to throw fuel on the fire, isn't it, to those conspiracy theorists who think that referees have an agenda, or they might be against a certain side because they dislike them, that they're showing some sort of partisanship. There's a lot of football fans who feel that referees are kind of out to get their team.
Well, particularly if you take social media as a reflection on real fans' views, then you would assume that there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. Look, football's tribal, as Jason says, it's not the greatest generation of referees, and it is a crisis in refereeing because the majority of referees will now go into games and have their decisions even more questioned by players, managers, and by supporters in the ground and online. And I think this has to really be used, this whatever's happened, as a watershed for the game to look at how referees are treated, to invest even more in the Premier League and PGMOL. They do invest heavily in grassroots refereeing. As Jason says, there's a crisis there in terms of the abuse that young referees get. Is it actually worth them sort of climbing up the ladder when they're going to get sort of abused all the way up? So what they've got to do also is, you're seeing so many talented footballers unable to make it in the game for whatever reason, whether it's injuries or lack of opportunity, coming out of academies. Why don't PGMOL, which I know they're trying to do, but just get more of these kids and actually get them and train them up, fast track them to be referees. Also specialist VARs as well. They've got to work on that. So this has got to be sort of looked in the round about how we can improve refereeing generally. And that's having a stronger respect campaign at grassroots level, so there is less abuse of referees and they're more likely to stay in the system and actually swell the talent at the top level.
OK, let's move on to England then, and to your paper, Jason, the front of the Telegraph, actually, it says clubs blame FA in player row. We'll get to some of the England players who were in Lee Carsley's squad a little bit later, but of course the story really is about the ones who aren't there. Explain why the clubs are blaming the FA in this particular row.
I think this is something we always feared might happen with this international get-together, with the fact that Thomas Tuchel isn't starting as England manager until January the 1st because he just wants to take care of the World Cup campaign. But really, my view, and I think the view of a lot of people, is that he should have taken this get together. He should have taken these two final Nations League games. And I think that the feeling is that not so many players would have withdrawn from the squad if he had done so. I mean, I think there probably has been conversations that have taken place at Premier League clubs, saying to some of their players who are obviously suffering injuries and fatigue and so on and so forth, that really, is it worth going to this camp? Because, you could argue the FA, how they taking it seriously themselves by allowing Thomas Tuchel not to start until January. They've left the caretaker in charge, but these are two competitive fixtures that matter to England. They need to get promoted back out of this Group B, basically, of Nation League, and back into the top tier. Otherwise, they face a playoff in the spring, which will be Thomas Tuchel's first games. But I think there's a real feeling that the FA have almost given players and clubs an excuse to withdraw from this camp. And the feeling is that it wouldn't have happened if a permanent manager had been taking this camp. And I agree with that. I think that's probably a feeling that you could argue that the FA, are they taking it seriously enough?
Yeah, Henry, what's your take on these withdrawals and then the relationship with Tuchel not having taken over yet?
It's inevitable, and Lee Carsley almost predicted it when he said a lot of the players in the squad are carrying injuries and issues. If you look at the 8 withdrawals, 7 of them are from top 4 clubs who are, 2 of them, Manchester City and Arsenal, are, they've got sort of injury issues. And if you actually look overall at the Premier League, of the 20 clubs, there are about 91 players injured at the moment and unavailable for their next games. So there is a huge issue with player workload in this country. But then you look at these clubs, and Manchester City and Chelsea, which obviously have huge issues, or certainly City do, issues with injuries. At the end of this season, they are going to go to the FIFA Club World Cup. And what's that going to last? Okay, so they're getting 40 million quid each for, as minimum, just for sort of turning up there, and possibly could double their money. There's huge money to be made there. And I understand why they need to go for PSR reasons. But they've got to also think of player workload. And if 1 or 2 players, not necessarily from those clubs, but are being sort of rested now because of fatigue, then just think about it in the round and not go on these post-season tours as well. The FA have also got to look at that, because they're thinking of going to America next summer and playing a couple of games out there. The thing is that we just play too many games in this country. This fatigue is inevitable. We're heading into the winter period where we don't have a proper winter break. So this will continue and continue. Jason's completely right in that Thomas Tuchel should be here now. We know he's an exceptional coach. We've seen it in Champions League finals. We've seen it in, with Chelsea and other clubs. If he is that good, which he is, then maybe if he took the players, more of whom would have turned up, and gone to Athens, won in Athens, then beaten the Republic of Ireland back at Wembley, then his first 2 games wouldn't be a playoff final in March. So it's a ridiculous situation the FA have gotten themselves into. And the other thing that Thomas Tuchel would have learned by spending time at St George's Park today and with England, out in, whether it's in the hotel, whether it's out on the grass, whether it's just seeing the players around the hotel, he would have got to know his players better. He would have been able to sort of actually started some of the meetings. This is what I expect from you. Whether it's going to be the usual, are they going to be allowed tomato sauce, or do they have to turn up absolutely 5 minutes early, otherwise it's going to be a fine, the discipline, what he expects, and also his longer term ambitions, which is England winning the World Cup. The clock is ticking on that, and he should be heading towards Athens tomorrow.
Yeah, Joseph, just wonder if there are mitigating factors in this. We don't quite know what his clause it was in the, leaving Bayern. I'm kind of guessing, I'm kind of clutching at straws a little bit for on his behalf. Lee Carsley was told he was going to get these games. Can we make a case for Thomas Tuchel not being here yet? You're shaking your head.
No, I'll tell you exactly why he's not here yet. He's decided he doesn't want to start until January the 1st. His view is that he wants to have a clean slate. He wants to start in January. He then takes the World Cup campaign, and as Henry just mentioned, he might not even be doing that straight away, because there'll be these Nations League playoff potentially if they don't win in Greece. He thinks he starts in June. He does 18 months, short, sharp, get into the players and try and win the World Cup. The other factor in that is Anthony Barry, who is going to be his number 2, can't start until the new year either. So he wants Anthony Barry in place. He doesn't want to start without his coaching staff, who is obviously at the moment in negotiations to get Enrique Hilario out of Chelsea as a goalkeeper. And I understand all of that. But actually, the bigger picture is He cannot make the number one excuse that international managers always have. They always tell us every time we see them, I never get enough time with the players. That is one excuse he can never, ever, ever use every time he talks to us now in the next 18 months, because he decided he didn't need to see the players this camp. That was his choice. It wasn't the FA's choice. It wasn't about clauses in contracts with Bayern Munich. It's not about trying to save money. It's not about, avoiding the having to wear a poppy this week or anything like that. It's simply because he chose not to come until January, and the FA have agreed with that.
All right, great stuff. Gentlemen, for now, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Sun as Ruben Amorim takes to the training ground on his first day at Manchester United. You're watching Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to Jason Burt, the Telegraph's chief football correspondent, and Henry Winter, the football writer and broadcaster. Henry, we're going to start at the back of the Sun. Pleased to meet Ruud Amorim's United front. Really nice picture of him hugging Mason Mount, who you feel needs probably a literal as well as a metaphorical hug. His time at United hasn't gone, quite according to plan yet, but a real feeling that this guy could be the real deal. He has this this magic touch, as he's shown at Sporting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mason Mount and also Luke Shaw as well, two England internationals who are sort of recuperating. Very interesting. Mason Mount, if he, as expected, Amorim plays a sort of 3-4-2-1 formation, Mason Mount might operate as one of the tens with Bruno Fernandes. Obviously, where does that leave the other attacking players they have, like Rashford and Garnacho and Ahmad, particularly Ahmad, who's been playing so well recently. Luke Shaw, obviously, it's just great to see a picture of Luke Shaw, because he's just been bedeviled by injury, which is very frustrating, because he should be, England's starting left back. He's so good. We've seen that in previous tournaments, but again, he's had these injuries, and he would fit in, if fit, as a left-sided wing back, because he can cross, he can defend. He's an outstanding player, but when fit, that's always the caveat. But absolutely, those pictures, which I assume come from the club, they're very much sort of send out a message of a feel-good factor. This is a emotionally empathetic individual coach in Ruben Amorim. His man management is well known, as well as his sort of tactical now. So yeah, good times ahead for Manchester United.
Oh well, that left back Luke Shaw kind of scenario kind of allows us to segue very nicely, Jason, into England. They have struggled to replace Luke Shaw while he's been injured, but today Lewis Hall was put up to the media, and in Lewis Hall, might they find someone that can do that job, because that has been England's problem position?
Yeah, it's nice to see a left-footed left back in the squad, isn't it? I mean, it's who'd have thought it? There is actually one out there that England can pick. I mean, I was always very perplexed by the decision to carry on not picking left backs who usually, picking players who usually play as a left back. I don't like square pegs in round holes, and I think Lewis Hall, player of great promise, one that Chelsea let go, obviously for a very big fee, but obviously the player who's been through that Chelsea sort of factory and not made it, and now obviously doing very, very well at Newcastle, and is forging a great career for himself. Probably a little bit early for him to be regarded as a sort of regular in the England squad, I imagine. Obviously, he's come into this squad partly through necessity, with other players being unavailable and out. But I think England really need to look at developing a player who can be a more reliable understudy for Luke Shaw, who clearly would be the first choice. And I think that really does have to be a specialist in that position. And as I say, it's something I've been quite perplexed by, that England haven't really tried that before, and have tried to shoehorn right backs into that role and centre halves into that role, and nobody's really quite nailed it. And I think this is a great opportunity for him to show that he can be England's future left back for many years to come.
Yeah, Henry, another young player who's doing well this year in the Premier League. Taylor Harwood-Bellis, you spoke to him today, I understand. I mean, we talked about the Thomas Tuchel, Lee Carsley scenario, but if Taylor Harwood-Bellis turns out over the next 5-10 years to be an England great, we might look back as a bit of masterstroke hanging on to Carsley, because he's playing essentially because Carsley and him have this reputation from the youth ranks.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was a year and a bit ago that Harwood Bellis was leading England's under-21s to European glory. Lee Carsley was obviously the coach there. I don't think they actually conceded a goal. So, I mean, he's obviously an outstanding defender. He didn't have the sort of strongest starts to the season at Southampton, but I think in recent games, and this is reflected in his call-up, he's been playing well for Southampton. So, and Lewis Hall as well. I mean, Jason just sort of mentioned him, another sort of under-21 player promoted. This is one of the important things about the England pathway and the under-21s. He's been playing really well. I've seen him in 3 of the last 4 under-21 games, and Lewis Hall's been one of the best players on the pitch. You can see the confidence he's got from playing for England at that level. You can see the sort of the improvement he's showing under Eddie Howe at Newcastle United. And as Jason says, you know, he's a terrific prospect. And right in the middle of training yesterday was Ashley Cole, probably England's greatest, most consistent left back, and Lewis Hall will be learning from Ashley Cole and developing even more.
Yeah, well, from a couple of England's kind of newbies moving on to a former kind of England great, I guess, in the Telegraph, Gary Lineker, who has been presenting Match of the Day, Jason, for 25 years. This is going to be his last season. The Telegraph asking, can Match of the Day survive Lineker's exit? Match of the Day is a programme that we're all familiar with, but it almost implying here that Oliver Brown, that it's maybe slightly antiquated, given that by 10 o'clock or 10:30 on a Saturday night, everyone's seen all the goals 5 hours before, but it still has its unique place and it still has its charm.
Yeah, it certainly does, and I think it's a huge decision now for the BBC as to what next. I think Gary Lineker has been the sort of continuity and the glue that's kind of held the programme together. It still gets very good viewing figures, but it is, as you say, it's a bit of an anachronism. You know, the way we digest, the way we consume sport nowadays, we want it instantaneously. You know, hanging on till Saturday evening to watch clips of games that we could easily have watched earlier in the day is a bit of a throwback, and you wonder what the demographic now is for the show, and that's the decision that the BBC have to make. Do they go for a similar type of presenter? Do they go for a similar age of presenter or somebody a little bit younger, or do they change it completely? One of the decisions that I read today was that they might even think about a kind of a revolving list of presenters. To me, that doesn't seem like the right idea. I think they probably need to have somebody to anchor it who's more of a sort of, you know, like a charismatic figure. Mark Chapman has obviously emerged as the early favourite, but I think something like Kelly Cates could be quite good if you could be lured away from Sky, personally. I'm not sure Sky would like me to say that, but no, it's a big decision for the BBC to make, and as you say, you know, it's a sort of strange anomaly in many ways as a show, but most of us feel very, very fondly towards it when that music's played. We think back to, you know, many years ago when we were growing up as children, very excitedly watching many years Match of the Day then. And I think, you know, obviously as an institution, it deserves to preserve. But whether it can carry on this in the current format is a good question, I think, and it's an interesting debate that we've had in the Telegraph today about it.
Yeah, in terms of Henry, just quickly on this, I mean, the revolving kind of presenter, do you see that being an option, or would you like to see someone kind of going in there to anchor it, as Jason mentions?
One person has to go in and anchor it. That's why it's succeeded in the past. And the fact that it's clearly still relevant, the fact that we're discussing it, the fact that the Telegraph has devoted 3 pages to it. And just one final thing on that, not everyone watches it at 10:20 on a Saturday night. If you're out or with friends, whatever, I mean, some of us get up early on a Sunday morning and watch it. There is catch up. So it has moved with the times.
All right, gentlemen, thank you ever so much.